Eddie, to Talking Point, The Vote. I'm Daniel Martin. We're into our last segment of the program. I know many of you have been calling in and are on hold. Please hold on. We'll come to your calls as soon as we can. We're getting a lot of calls. Minister, was this situation of how it was communicated a communications disaster? Some people have been talked about how quickly it was done and perhaps the wording and the fact that some things were clarified at different points. Was it a communications disaster?
Well, I think in hindsight, more details should have probably come up earlier. I think when some of the details were not addressed up front in the initial release, I think people began to speculate and think, is this so all-encompassing? And most importantly, is that this is censorship, and therefore I'm not going to be able to say what I want to say. I'm not going to be able to post what I want to post. But the truth of the matter is, I think this engagement space cannot be regulated in that way. I think we can't turn the clock back. In fact, I think we should embrace it as part of the whole engagement. I think both of government with the people and people with people. I think you have to accept that that's part of that. And you need to allow people to articulate their views, because I think we will be shortchanged if we actually don't have that. So that uncertainty, I think, probably happened as a result of perhaps not all the details coming forward. So I think in hindsight, perhaps more of these details could have been presented from the onset. So at least it will allay some of the concerns. There will be other concerns and there will be other issues that we'll continue to debate, but at least it allows some of the clarity to be put forward much earlier. Speaking
of articulating your views, our viewers are voting on our poll. Will the new licensing rule limit online news content? Yes has sailed ahead in the majority. 71.7% are now saying yes, 28.3% saying no. When the show started, about 47% were saying yes. So more on the yes for now. Keep voting, of course, all throughout the program. We've got Eddie standing by at 669-10028. Hi, Eddie.
Yeah, hello.
On the air, Eddie, go ahead with your question.
Yeah, the question for the minister, as mentioned earlier, we have all the acts and regulation already in place to cover any abuse. So I'd like to ask the minister is, what's one incident that happened recently that our current acts or regulation are unable to cover it?
And that's what, okay, thank you very much, Eddie. Was there something that our current acts were not able to cover?
I think it's related to the earlier point, whether there's a particular tipping point which sparked this move. I would say no.
So no is to the response to that question. So that our current acts are sufficient?
I think our current acts allow us to take a series of actions. But I think with regards to news sites, I think we feel that particularly for news sites, I think there needs to be a certain level of responsibility. Most of them have exercised that. I think what we have done is I think with the change is that there's more specific responsibility imposed on the news sites. And secondly, I think it also allows for government to ask the sites to take down particular postings within 24 hours. And what kind of posts, as we mentioned earlier, would be those that we've described earlier. But as far as views, criticisms, alternatives, perspectives, those remain, and those could remain online. It's not a problem.
Do you think that the existence of these regulations could let existing news sites have a little bit of uncomfort or discomfort with what they're going to report or how they're going to report?
I would say that actually existing news sites should continue to report as they've been reporting. I think they should be encouraged to air their views, critical or otherwise, and that should not change.
Will it change for you as a consumer of the news? We've got our next caller standing by. Christina, hello.
Hi, good evening. Daniel, yes. Thank you. I want to comment that, I agree with the caller that says that I want to read the right things. Yeah, because I have seen sites where there's news content. I find that, I'm firstly quite appalled by it. Then secondly, I feel that if I want to go to news site, I really want to see that there's some responsibility on the part of the giver, the writer, and the sites. And
so, Christina, if you know that this is a regulated, licensed site, will that make you feel better as a consumer when you go there?
Some comfort level, yes. Yes, certainly, that will be comfort level for me.
All right, Christina, thank you so much for joining us.
I'd like to trust the site, yeah.
Thank you very much. Bertha, your quick response. People want to see, and maybe the licensing will help.
So basically, we should be licensing more sites?
Would it help the majority of consumers?
I don't think so, but because basically my argument still holds. What really is the government intent behind it? I think it's, from what I've heard from the minister, he's talking about cyberbullying, other things and other practices which is not practiced by the 10 sites, and is practiced elsewhere.
Let's come back to that idea, the idea of will it expand beyond the 10 sites?
Right.
Minister, do you foresee that it would?
No, I think it is really aimed at sites that are reporting news in Singapore. Rest of the sites, which are personal blogs, commentaries, I think that's something that we feel.
No, let's say for example, if there is a video that's circulating, right, and it isn't run on those 10 sites, it's run on every other site, then what are you going to do? The 10 sites are perfectly all right.
Because
You
they're
don't
not
have-
licensed.
No, because they're licensed and they are not doing anything wrong.
Right, the others are not licensed.
Yeah, the others are not licensed and they're circulating all around. So
Do
what
we
is
rely
the
on
government
existing
going
regulation in
But
that
there is
case?
a case in point. TOC has specifically asked the question. They run news. They've hit the 50,000 and gone way beyond. Why aren't they licensed?
NDA has looked at them specifically and felt that at this point in time, I mean, they're not a new site to be regulated.
But it didn't make it clear that you are not, a licensing target.
They're not part of the dead
Because, yeah.
sites. Over time, will there be new sites? I think there might be more new sites that come online. And I think when that happens, MDA will
I think
correspond
that's
with
the
those
problem,
sites.
right? I mean, they think they're a new site. You don't think they're a new site. So who is deciding what's a new site?
Who is a new site in that sense?
Yeah.
What if you're hosted overseas on an overseas server, for example?
So that's something that we have to address. And that's why I mentioned that I think the bigger shift that we need to look at is actually in terms of the whole Broadcasting Act. That's something that we're looking at next year, and that's something that we have to look with the different players, the different perspectives. How do we actually manage that space? Because it is complex, and there are people that are hosting news from overseas sites. How do you actually manage it? I'm not even sure whether you...
Is it a futile attempt? I want to talk about the complexities.
There will be some areas which actually, like I mentioned earlier, I think the internet is a space you cannot control.
Yes.
I think you wouldn't be able to be successful. But whether do you have a light touch in terms of regulating some space of it? And for us, we think that sites that are reporting news warrants that. But the rest of it, as of now, we don't think that that should be part of that
I'm
landscape.
going to take some back-to-back calls, everybody. Francis first. Hi, Francis. Francis, you're on the air. Hi.
It was raised just now that Mr. Yaakob was saying that in the interview with the BBC that we should be given the right news, specifically the right news. So who is going to determine the right news? I find it somewhat objectionable in some ways that somebody has to determine for me what the right news is. Shouldn't I be the one to determine what the right news is? If I don't like something, if I don't like a blog, I should just avoid it. If I like something, I should just continue to look at it. Why should there be any licensing scheme to tell me what to do? I find that very, very uncomfortable.
Thank you for sharing that. I want to go to our next caller who's standing by as well. Go ahead, Prashant.
Yeah, so my point is basically saying that it's all about the government's prerogatives, and if tomorrow something goes wrong, all the citizens basically look up to the government to set the things right. So, in a way, the government is doing the right thing by regulating this, because tomorrow, if anything goes wrong, just for an example, this SMRT strike, some negative view on this site, and if something would have gone wrong, everybody would have looked at the government saying that why didn't you do it earlier?
Hindsight is
If it
2020,
taking
isn't
a
it?
proactive, if it's taking a proactive step already.
Thank
and
you
with
very
a
much,
transparent-
Prashant. I understand that you're for the regulations in that sense, so for and against on both sides of the fence there. Minister, your quick response in terms of I know what to read, don't tell me what to read.
I do accept the fact that Singaporeans would have to exercise their own judgment as to what sites they want to read. And there are many, many sites online. I think what we're saying is that for sites that are reporting news, I think that's a requirement that we're putting on them. But the rest of the sites, I think that's free for people. And many of the sites offer commentaries, perspectives as well. But I think what we're just saying is that for new sites, I think we do expect a basic level of responsibility there.
Okay, I want to come to your point, Arun, which is the idea that how it's such a wide medium. What do you want to ask Minister about?
Okay, well, the fundamental point about internet is it is no respecter of national boundaries or national laws. We can easily cross these boundaries, and if there is a persistent or a recalcitrant blogger or commentator, what can you do with your regulation? Especially when it is about the right thing, which is not terrorism, which is not child pornography, where many countries will cooperate with you. But here we are talking about the right thing in terms of certain types of speech. And I'm wondering whether Singapore government will, in the end, have another piece of legislation which doesn't have, it may have the bark but no bite.
Minister, your response.
Well, like I said, I think the regulations largely deal with the new sites. I think in terms of whether
But, you know, cross-border...
understand. So that's an area which I think I'm not sure it's that easy to in fact, even try to regulate, because that's why it's a very amorphous space. Which is why my point is I think you can't control it, but I think you need to see where it makes sense, some form of a light regulation, and that's why we are applying it to local news sites. Now, whether it could actually even be practically extended beyond the borders, I think that's a different ball game altogether, and that actually might not be possible. But that's something that we need to explore and see how that
I've got 3 minutes left only. I'm just going to take a quick phone call, and if we have time, we'll come back to this. Your question to our next caller. Hello there. Chi Wat.
Yes,
I
I just want to
go ahead.
find out if the minister can go on air now and give us the assurance that the government won't ever classify blogs and individual websites as news sites, and that these will never come under a regulation.
Chi Wat, are you a blogger by any chance?
No, I'm not.
Not a blogger. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Minister, is that something that we can say for certain? We know that it was a blog post, a Facebook post. Will it be ensconced in the wording?
Well, I think, like I said, the regulations deals with news sites. It doesn't encompass blogs. But would some blogs become news sites, and then it evolves to become news sites? I think that's something that we need to look at. But as a broad principle, it's meant to cover those that are reporting news. Individual blogs, commentaries, that remains open.
Unless it morphs into a news site.
If it morphs into a news site, then I think that's something that we have to look at. But otherwise, in the main, most of these blogs, most of these commentary pages, I think they remain as it is, and they will not be captured under regulations.
When is it a news site?
I think when it actually aims at reporting on a regular basis news in Singapore, I think we're provided for some of that. And MDA has, as a regulator, would have to assess.
Has to decide.
But I think the idea is to actually look at those who are reporting in the main news in Singapore. The rest, many of the blogs are commentaries. They have an active interest in local affairs. But I think those don't particularly come under that definition of news sites per se.
Last minute.
Right. I want to weigh in on Minister Yacob's side on this thing called the right thing. I think what he meant, if you read the full quote, is that it's got to be the right thing and that it's not false. It's attributed, it's sourced, it's verified.
Responsible
which is
journalism.
responsible journalism, professional work, rather than the right thing to read in terms of like
I'm
type
telling you
of
what to read.
content or type to read. Now, I think that's a good point, and I think even those on the online community has to be fair about that. That those are the practices that should be put in place.
Take the quote in its full context, especially.
Okay, that's one. But in all other respects, there's some professionalism to be injected if they report on news. The big question, though, is whether this current scheme is the way to do it.
On that note, thank you to all my panelists. I really appreciate you joining us. Let's see a final look at how our poll is standing right now. Will the new licensing rule limit online news content? 73.6 saying yes and 26.4 saying no. You can keep on voting, of course, at our poll at channelnewsasia.com/TP, and you can leave your comments on our Facebook page, have your say, and also tweet us at TP Vote. We hope we were able to answer at least some of the questions with regard to how this new licensing scheme will affect us all. And of course, you can catch up for the encore editions on our Facebook page, on our website as well, the microsite channelnewsasia.com/TP. Thank you for watching. I'm Daniel Martin, and this has been Talking Point. Good night, everybody.